That was a shitload of full frontal that she was given in that show.
Yeah, I wonder if you get paid. There's a lot of full frontal in this from dudes and chicks. Just dicks and bush everywhere.
The world is flat.
Good morning, Vietnam. I don't know. I wanted to try something different because that was one of my favorite movies of all time when I was younger. I love me some Robin Williams. Welcome to another episode of Owls at Dawn. We are just two dudes from Southern California who studied philosophy, politics, and religion around the world. And we decided to start a podcast where we could bullshit with impunity. I'm Austin Hayden Smith.
And I'm Troy Polidori.
So let's go. The way we're going to start it off is the way we start off every episode, where one of us gets to rant about something that is chapping our hide. And this week, Troy has drawn the lot, so he gets to rant. T-Roy, what is your shitty minute?
My shitty minute this week, is about finals. Actually, just assessments in general. We just finished up finals week this week. And in addition to all the stresses that students have to go through, and we remember that well, right? The stresses of finals week. And being an instructor or teacher during finals week sucks ass too, because you don't have to prepare as much, but you have to grade, and grading is the bane of all existence, right? So my shitty minute goes to just the idea of education being bent towards this goal of regurgitating information onto assessment forms, basically. Just the whole notion is stupid. The idea that success means these rigid regurgitations, just taking information you've gotten in the past and being able to reproduce it in some particular form with complete lack of creativity or necessarily critical thinking or any of those aspects that actually speak to intelligence much more than just reproduction. I kind of hate it. It's like a necessary evil now, I feel like. I hate it. I tell my students I hate it. I told them that, if I had my druthers, we would never do things like this, like have exams or quizzes or any of that shit. We would just get together, read books, talk about it, and write a paper, maybe, at the end, if I felt necessary.
Yeah, do you think Plato, when he was walking around, doing his peripateo shit, was like, hey, Aristotle, quiz on Friday about the forms?
Yeah, no, fuck that shit, right? Can you imagine joining up the academy and being like, you got to take an entrance exam to see where you fit in the geometry spectrum?
Right. What are your thoughts on the pre-Socratic philosophers? Democritus, go. Aristotle, what do you think? Epicurus, what's your thought? Yeah, no, I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like Aristotle probably wasn't like, explain the four causes to me in essay form, and then you'll pass, whatever. Yeah, the whole thing's just stupid. And I was going to bring up, think about the ancient Greeks, the idea of virtue and focus on character, habit formation. I wanted to talk or think about this notion of developing a positive freedom as the goal of education, right? Education is supposed to be about giving yourself new possibilities. When you learn new information, new ideas, new concepts, you can creatively use them for whatever it is you want to do. You create new desires in yourself when you learn new things. You form new social bodies with people. These are the things that education is supposed to be about, this positive freedom notion, whereas as it is now, it's just meant to get a letter grade that you can use to end up getting a shitty career working for somebody else, making them money. And we talk about it all the time that education sucks in that way, but it's like the pinpoint accuracy of finals just pictures that idea. Rushing around between classes, filling out exam forms and all that bullshit and grading them and submitting grades. It just comes to a head and makes you want to kind of just say, fuck the whole thing. Let's go live in the forest.
Yeah, like Captain Fantastic. Have you seen that
movie? I just saw that. Yeah, so I was thinking about that. Let's just go be a philosopher king somewhere in the forest, man.
God damn, man. It's so crazy, too. The anxiety and the stress that we self-impose because of this on our students and on the faculty, but I'm thinking also more about the students, is something that's really detrimental to our psychological well-being. I mean, because it's something that you have to embody from when you're a child, right? Standardized testing is something that you embody, anxiety, because there's a test, and then you get a grade, and then your parents get mad, and then it's this cycle of disciplining the body under these rubrics of fear and domination and power and shit like that, that it just embeds itself within us, so that by the time, obviously, you get to university, it's just kind of standard, right? But it really is, I don't know. I don't think it's ultimately beneficial in the creation of humanisms or in the stimulation of, like you say, positive freedoms and the stimulation of virtue and creating happy, healthy, harmonious civil life.
Yeah, it stifles all these creative and empathic forms of intelligence that we actually know psychologically are better for well-being and for social well-being as well. So,
yeah.
I mean, we know all this information. For some reason, knowing it all does jack all to actually affect the system.
Yeah, there's an educator and activist in the UK named Sir Ken Robinson. Have you ever read any of his works?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so he talks a lot about how the educational system stifles creativity, right? And it crushes the imagination. And I can't remember the study, but it was something along the lines of this. Of course, I'm playing fast and loose with the details here, but you'll get the gist of it. It was this study where they took like 4-year-olds and they gave them like a paperclip, and they were like, okay, what can you do with this paperclip? And they could come up with like 100 different things. And then they took those same 4-year-olds when they were 10 and they said, what can you do with this paperclip? And they came up with like 20 different things. And then they took those same 10-year-olds when they were 15 and then 20 and then 25. And by the time they had gone through the education system, you know, by the time they're in their mid-20s, they're like, it's a fucking paperclip. I don't know. That's what you can do with it. And it's this idea that we stifle. Now, of course, part of that is part of biological development, but there's also an element of these social factors that impinge upon and that squeeze out our ability to use the sort of more open part of the brain. Like what does Ian McGilchrist call it in The Divided Brain? You know, there's the side of the brain, not the side of the brain, and like just the simple breakdown of like one side is for language and one side is, but the idea that you know, part of the brain primarily focuses on creativity and openness and shit like that.
The Master and the Emissary. You talking about that one?
Yeah, that one, something like that. Yeah, good shit. There's an RSA animate on it, I think, on Ian McGilchrist and The Divided Brain. That was kind of cool.
Yeah, I know the thing you're talking about, the paperclip. I guess the idea was that younger kids are able to imagine the paperclip being 30 feet tall, or, you know, all different sizes, shapes. It doesn't have to be the small paperclip that we know, but then kids slowly become, you know, sort of socialized and normalized into this sense that a paperclip has to only be one kind of thing that's presented as in society, and so then they give up on any ability to think creatively or outside the box.
I like your shitty minute this week, Troy.
Yeah, I figured you would.
Not because it makes me feel good, but it kind of, I'm with you. I hate that shit too, man.
Yeah, fuck higher education. Oh wait, no, don't do that. Usually we say that at the end of the shitty minute, but this time no. Fix it.
Yeah, that's right. Fix higher education.
Fix, don't
I'm
fuck.
sure that, what's her name? Betsy DeVos, is that her name?
Oh, she'll solve all of our problems, right?
And what's her name? Is it Betsy or Betty?
Something DeVos, yeah, something like that. I forget.
Yeah, something DeVos. Yeah, whatever. All right. Well, moving on, let's go into the main segment this week. Westworld. That's what we'll be talking about.
Talk about Westworld.
Troy did a shitty minute a couple weeks ago, and he was slagging Westworld off. And I think embedded in his criticism of Westworld was a sort of subtle dig at me, saying that I have bad taste in TV.
That wasn't subtle, yo.
Of course, then I did redeem myself with Rectify last week.
Yeah, I made it up to you.
Okay, so now I'm back to zero. I'm back to square one, right? So, we're going to talk about Westworld. Troy, you finished Westworld. Yeah,
I finished it last night. Before I say anything, I want to know what you thought of the last few episodes, but especially the finale and how it all played out.
Okay, real quick, let me just say real quick, just for people that are listening, what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about Westworld as like just as the show and the storyline and whatnot, and then at the end we're going to talk more about sort of the conceptual and philosophical issues about consciousness, and we're going to talk about a guy named Julian Jaynes and bicamerality, and probably some sort of deflationary concepts of consciousness, like eliminativism and things like that. I imagine those things will come up. So stay with us through the narrative stuff, and then we'll get to philosophy, or just stick around for the narrative stuff and ditch the philosophy, whatever you want to do. Okay, so I actually just watched it last night as well, the 10th episode last night. So I will have to say that for me, it ran out of steam a little bit in terms of the story. I was really into it. when it first started. Now, I could partly blame you, Troy, for the fact that it ran out of steam, because maybe you just put your negative affect into me, and it affected my disposition towards the show. No, it started to run out of steam for me about 4 or 5 episodes in, and then it picked up again, and then it kind of, the last 2 episodes, I was relatively underwhelmed. Not that I didn't enjoy it. I still thought it was very interesting. I think conceptually it's really interesting. I think some of the ideas are cool. But just from a narrative perspective, just from a storytelling perspective, I started to run out of steam a little bit. Are we going to do spoilers, by the way? Is this?
Yeah, I mean, mild spoilers isn't a big deal.
Okay, spoilers, people, spoilers. But the woman who was the head of the brothel, I can't remember, what was her name?
Maeve? Isn't that Maeve?
Yeah,
Tandy
Maeve.
Newton.
First of all, she is an angel. And second of all, what's that look on your face? You want to say something?
That was a shitload of full frontal that she was given in that show.
Yeah, I wonder if you get paid. There's a lot of full frontal in this from dudes and chicks, just dicks and bush everywhere. But I thought her story was really interesting at first. And then when she's kind of like wakes up and then wants to fucking go on her little robot revolution, I don't know. It didn't quite interest me as much. I sort of, and maybe I'm a sadist for saying this, but I appreciated her going through the existential crises of the flashbacks and the memories and her trying to stay within the world rather than when she was awakened and realized that this was a fictitious amusement park or a world. So that storyline didn't quite do it for me. I love Jeffrey Wright. If Jeffrey Wright doesn't get nominated for an Emmy for this fucking show, I'm gonna burn the fucker down because he is brilliant. Oh my god! I mean, just his technician as an actor, he is fucking amazing. Literally, he's perfect. He's perfect. He never pushes anything. He's always in the moment. His ability to connect and feed off of people and just be there with the sort of harmony of the scene. I was like, oh my god, this is a masterclass in acting. I thought his story was amazing at first. I really love him, and because he's so charismatic, I can kind of just watch him do anything. I thought his story was pretty much amazing throughout. I liked the twists where he's kind of the robot version of Arthur.
Arnold.
Arnold, I'm sorry, thank you. Arnold. Yeah, I dig that shit. Anthony Hopkins is brilliant. He's got to be, in my opinion, the greatest actor of our generation. So again, I can just watch him do whatever. So I think that was brilliant. I dug the way he went out. I don't want to say anything, but that was I kind of dug that shit. Very nihilistic, but sort of romantic at the same time. And I kind of dug that. And I like the fact that there was this sort of almost a proletarian revolution, if you will. It kind of reminds me of, the reboot of the Ape movies. What are they called? Like the Planet... What was it? Not the Planet of the Apes one, but the second one. It was like the Rise of the Planet of the Apes.
Yeah.
It was basically a fucking Marxist revolution, I remember I was watching it on TV and I was like, holy shit, how did this get through... like, are people seeing this right now? And maybe I was just projecting my own presuppositions onto it, but I kind of felt that with this as well, that there was, through the emergence of consciousness, that there is a sort of proletarian revolution. So I thought that was interesting. And so the story I thought was interesting. It had some interesting bits. I didn't really give a fuck about James Marsden.
Cyclops, yeah.
Yeah, he didn't really do much for me. The dude from It's Always Sunny, what's the guy that has the crush on Evan Rachel Wood, William, that ends up being Ed Harris.
Oh, Jacob from Lost?
So Jacob from Lost. He's also in It's Always Sunny.
Is he?
He's
he's one of the gross brothers. That's right. I didn't notice that until now.
Yeah, he's one of the gross brothers.
McPhail, something like that.
What
are
they called?
Brothers?
I don't know what they're called. The McSomething brothers.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's one of them. Yeah. I really like him as an actor because he's also in House of Cards as a hacker, and I really like him. But his story, I felt, got a little cut off. And I kind of dug, how they wrap it around and he becomes Ed Harris when he's older. So I kind of dug that bit. I liked Ed Harris. I know you didn't like Ed Harris, but I liked Ed Harris and his quest for knowledge, his search for knowledge. I thought that was interesting. So ultimately, I would give it a B+. That's what I'll say.
Okay. So my take on it is the first like 6 episodes, I wanted to quit so hard. I just wanted to just rage quit this thing and never think about it ever again. But I powered through because
You mean rage quit it like fucking Jesus style, like turning your table over and just burning shit down?
yeah, I stuck with it because I knew that you would want me to, and my inner conscience is driven by your voice. I have auditory hallucinations in my bicameral mind of you telling me to watch the show.
Just call me Arnold.
And so I powered through it, and I liked the last 2 episodes a lot. They were still terrible for all the same reasons that I kind of felt that the rest of the season was, but at least the ideas started to come to fruition a little bit, and some interesting things were there. Like I remember in Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-5, Billy Pilgrim talks about this sci-fi writer that he really loves, and he's like a minor character in the book. And at one point he mentions that the books are never popular because the prose is horrible, and the stories are terrible, and they're ridiculous, but the ideas are good. And like that's the whole gimmick, is that the ideas are really good. They're just executed in just like atrocious way. But it's okay to consume them because the ideas are fun to think about. This is how I feel about Westworld. I enjoy talking about it and even thinking about it a hell of a lot more than I enjoy watching it. Except for maybe the last episode, because some plotty stuff actually happened in like an entertaining video game way. You can kind of, vicariously feel something for once. Because the problem is there are no characters in the show. I mean, the only human characters who you can actually maybe empathize with a little bit were Bernard, who, guess what, isn't a human. Anthony Hopkins, who basically, I think, showed up to set for like 2 days, didn't know what was happening, and it was like checking out, Evan Rachel Wood on the side while he was supposed to be delivering his lines. But he's so Anthony Hopkins that doesn't matter. He can still deliver a great performance. Like he's smiling, he's smirking the whole time. And I feel like the smirk wasn't even part of the acting thing. I think it's just Anthony Hopkins being like, I'm making so much goddamn money for doing nothing.
Maybe.
And we knew he was going to die because Anthony Hopkins, 1,000 years old, does not sign up for multiple seasons of a sci-fi prestige drama on HBO. I feel like Ed Harris kind of just showed up and put on a cowboy hat. And they told him to like go be a dick. I'm not sure he had any idea, like,
but now
his larger story
his struggle and his thirst and his quest to find knowledge in the center of the maze, did that not in any way appeal to you as someone who is interested in human striving and those sorts of journeys that we war as we try to find whatever the fucking end goal is?
Sure, but it's totally abstract. Like, I picked up maybe an episode or 2 before the reveal that Jacob from Lost, what's his name, William, was Ed Harris.
You did? I didn't get that at all.
Yeah,
That
the timelines thing was they were kind of putting it out there. And so I tried to start thinking about, well, how did Ed Harris end up the Man in Black? How did he end up like this? When he's, in love with Dolores and he wants the robots to be free and to fight back and this whole thing. And then he ends up this like cynical misanthrope who just comes back to the park every year or whatever it is, buys the major stake in it so he owns it technically, just to find this maze that Dolores keeps looking for. And like I don't get why he cares so much about finding this out. And like he gets at the end of the last episode, he gets shot for real and he's like smiling like, oh my god, this is so amazing. When did he become this total like psychopath? I didn't see the transition from loving, caring character that we feel for to psychopath. I don't really get how he moved from one to the other. But anyway,
did you get it in the final episode though?
No, I don't see it at all. I mean, it's the original transition from his Jacob from Lost character. I can't remember the guy's name. I feel bad to keep saying that. to the Man in Black. I don't see. They didn't really show that. I guess we're supposed to assume he just becomes psychopathic.
So you still didn't see it. So when he's going through and he's trying to connect with this being, I guess, this entity, Dolores, he's trying to find her, then he does find her, and when he finds her, she obviously has been reset, and is this lack. I mean, he has kind of built up this hope that this woman would almost be his salvation, so to speak, right? And then he gets there and he realizes that she is not his salvation. And so I think for him, his quest was ultimately about self-discovery, right? He needed to find that quote-unquote truth from within that is kind of, I think it was kind of hokey, the sort of like Cartesian turn at the end where it was like, oh, but the real answer, Dolores, is that you're listening to yourself. And it was like this weird, like, I think, therefore I am sort of weird moment, right? But I think that for him, that was kind of something else too. It was a journey of self-discovery, and he had to realize that it wasn't externally where you find these satisfactions of human desire, but rather it's the sort of expression of yourself as you are seeking external things that then reverts back inward, and then you find out who you really are.
Yeah, and I get that. And then Anthony Hopkins has that scene where he's pointing to the God creates Adam painting, right? And he points out that the God and the angels or whatever have the picture behind them sort of a brain. So the idea is actually it's not God creates man, it's man creates God through man's brain. Mm-hmm. And that's supposed to be the kind of a guiding theme here, is that turning inward is the depthful exploratory adventure, not outward into a Western adventure, which is, I think, obviously that's they placed it there for that very reason, to juxtapose the typical adventure style in a Western with turning inward instead of looking at consciousness itself as the true mystery. And like that's cute. That's so Nolan-esque to have a really great idea like that, and it to be really beautiful. Like when you pitch it, like if you pitch that, it'd be like, oh shit, that's awesome. Yeah, give me like 10 episodes of that in a second. And then it's just the idea is so great and it's conceptually brilliant and I love it. But then it's like, okay, this is super fatalistic. Anthony Hopkins basically is like, okay, fuck the world then, and everyone's gonna die. I'm gonna end the human race, or whatever.
Yeah. So where do you think it goes forward from here? So for people who are listening, I mean, I guess we'll give a little bit of a spoiler, but the idea is that, you know, these AI, these robots, there are a handful of them over the years that had a certain depth of what would we say, self-reflexivity, so that they were starting to become more quote-unquote alive, right? And at the very end, this new narrative that Anthony Hopkins' character has been developing as he's getting pushed out by the board of the large corporation that owns the majority shares of this park, this new narrative that he's developing is basically the culmination of all of his life's work, which was to create consciousness, to create life. And he pretty much has done that to as high a degree as possible by allowing individuals to have achieved a sort of semblance of self-reflexivity, and understanding that the voices that they hear in their head aren't just programs. It's not just an algorithm telling you what to do, but that's my own thoughts. That's my own consciousness guiding me forward. And so the very end is he gets killed. It's sort of a suicide, that he has obviously programmed one of the AI, Dolores, to kill him. And then there's this, out of the bushes emerges this mob of new free AI, and they just start fucking people over and killing them and shit like that. So the question is, where does it go from here?
Really quick, do you really think that was his goal? Because I'm confused about Anthony Hopkins' like whole deal. He says at one point, he quotes Oppenheimer and saying that if it takes 10 years to fix a man's mistakes, then that's quite a man. And he mentioned that it's taken 30 whatever years to fix his mistakes. And he originally, I guess the story was that Arnold was the one who really wanted to create consciousness just for the sake of it. He wanted to create life out of nothing. And he's the one who introduced the Jaynes bicameral stuff, which we'll talk about in a minute. And that Hopkins, he said he didn't believe it. He thought, no, these are just programmed responses. They're hearing your voice in their head. This is just whatever. And he several times in the show is an eliminativist. He says that consciousness does not exist. It's just pre-programmed responses. So is he like admitting at the end that, oh, I think I was wrong? Every time when these robots achieved the level of consciousness that Arnold was looking for, I just thought, well, this is not actually happening. I'm going to roll them back because if anybody found out about this, then we'd be in trouble. Is he admitting that he was wrong the whole time and Arnold was right, and that's why he's sacrificing himself in a way?
Or what's the other option?
I don't know. Is there a turn, basically? Is there a heel turn where he's admitting Arnold was right the whole time and he's, allowing the robots to then take over because he wants to sort of make amends? Or was this like his plan all along for 30 years? He wanted to destroy humanity or something? I don't know. Plus, dude, what the fuck is up with the dude? I don't remember his name. The dude who fixes the robots when they've been jacked up.
Yeah, the Asian dude?
Yeah, that dude he destroyed humanity. He literally just ended the world.
I didn't like that whole plot line to me. I didn't enjoy. Like when Maeve and him were doing their shit, I don't know. That didn't do it for me.
I feel like we're going to find out that Ford had the whole thing planned and that was just all a sideshow or something. And it's like, okay.
Well, remember Maeve, at one point, Bernard wakes up and opens up that little tablet and shows her that all of this stuff, all of these plans that you think are spontaneously and freely created by yourself have actually been planned. And I know that you're going to go to the train and then she's like, stop. And then she breaks it. Mm-hmm. And she's like, I'm free. I'm in control. And so the question is was she supposed to get on the train and then go? Or is this all some sort of programmed response because of a complex algorithm that then she gets on the train, she realizes it, and then she realizes that she wants to go back into the park and experience, the lie that tells the truth, which is Anthony Hopkins has that monologue that's going on while she's sitting there and she's starting to remember her own child that was a fake child, but it's the idea of feeling the experience of emotion. So the lie that tells the truth. What is the truth that's being told? Human connection, human emotion, things like that. That's the truth that's told through the lie of the story of living in Westworld that Maeve, I think, experiences. And she gets off the train and she goes back in, right? So I thought that was interesting. Again, but I thought that was conceptually interesting, not that the story was all that interesting. So I don't know, man. That storyline where that dude kept waking her up and then kept giving her more and more cognitive depth, I was like, what the fuck? I don't know. I kind of thought those scenes were boring.
What you talking about?
The ones where Maeve wakes up and the Asian dude's repairing her, and then he's like constantly repairing her. He's giving her more like depth of cognition. He's like expanding her abilities and her cognitive capacities, and he's giving her all this information, and he's taking her all around. I just didn't like any of that stuff. I thought that was kind of weak. It was almost like they were trying to make it too heisty, right? Like, we're gonna make this into some sort of action film where more danger and problems are going to emerge because she's getting out and his life is on the line and his job is on the line and he's sacrificing his career so that he can be committed to her who's experiencing freedom, and he wants to, she seems so lifelike and he doesn't want to stifle. I don't know what the fuck. It just seems kind of weak to me.
Yeah, but there were samurai. You saw the samurai?
Yeah, the samurai were cool.
I just want season 2 to be just Samurai World. East World.
Nippon World.
That'd be badass. I would have watched that show 1,000 times over.
Yeah. Nippon World.
Can we get Ken Watanabe to be in that, please? They can just bring back Tom Cruise to just make it Last Samurai all over again.
Ken Watanabe would be the new Robert Ford in this next one.
Oh yeah, he would be. He has a very inscrutable. You can't tell if he's he's very ambiguously morally developed.
I'm down with that.
Yeah, I can do that.
But okay, so going back to your question about Anthony Hopkins, I don't know if it was the sort of I realized that Arthur was right all along or not, but I do think that, and so that it was kind of like this fatalistic, my mistakes over 30 years have never been figured out and corrected, so I'm just kind of going out on top, I'm killing myself. But I do think that there was something interesting in the sense that I think he did come around and did think that life could be created, because he does say to Jeffrey Wright's character, to Bernard, in the church when they come up from the last time, he says something like your freedom and whatnot is in the future, but you're going to have to be here for a long time, and you're going to have to suffer, and you're going to have to deal with the sort of the torture of being imprisoned here for a lot longer. But nevertheless, it is going to figure itself out. Evolution will find its way, I thought. So that's why I kind of thought it was a little bit romantic, even though it was also nihilist. There was like a nihilistic romance in there. Yeah, I mean, the problem with Hopkins' character, with Ford, is just that he's basically God. Like, he's omniscient. He knows everything. He never makes mistakes. He's always 3 steps ahead of everybody else. And, like, that's fine for a bit character, but then
it's really difficult to empathize with that. And if there's going to be a heel turn at the end, you're just not going to be believable because he's known everything the whole time. Like what then stokes him? Something has to change to make him question what he's done for 30 years, the beliefs he's had for all that time. I just didn't find any of that terribly believable. But he's dead. God's dead. So that's a lot more interesting, I guess. Although now the only characters who are left are robots. So
yeah, that's going to be interesting. What happens now? I mean, is this like Jurassic Park where they fucking break out, where the first one is all contained in the park and chaos breaks loose, and then the second one is they go to New York?
It would be so weird if the rest of the series was just like all action and there was none of this like, you know, plotting idea exposition that's taken up so much of the, you know, 11 hours or whatever there was of the show so far. They should have just made this like a 2-hour movie and then had like sequels.
Michael Crichton did do a movie.
That's what it should have been. It really should have been
in the 70s.
Like 2-3 hours maybe. Miniseries.
Yeah, well that's the problem with high concept film and series, right? Is that it's really difficult to sort of squeeze out narrative that can actually last and engage for a long period of time. So it will be interesting. I mean, maybe there'll be like some sort of weird worldwide singularity revolution where the AI now break out of Westworld and start to figure out how to release all the other machines and give consciousness or emergent consciousness or mentality, whatever it might be, to the broader technological paradigm.
That's the thing, though, dude, is I feel like you can do high concept prestige stuff in genre context. Like, as much as there's many problems with Game of Thrones, one thing it does very well is characters. I mean, you have major characters like Sean Bean, who is the character you root for in the beginning, and he dies a horrible death, and so you question, am I ever going to watch this again? And then from there rises up other characters that you really care for and you want to see succeed and, you know, battle their demons and whatnot. It's simple. It's not difficult. But I feel like Westworld doesn't have any of that. I don't really give a shit if the robots win or lose. I don't care. Only person I care about is a character who was never alive during the show. And that's Arnold. Like, I feel bad for Arnold. I care about... I would watch a prequel that's just about Arnold trying to create consciousness in Dolores because of his past with his son and everything, and he wants to create something. Like, that's intriguing to me. I'd watch that. I don't really give a shit about anybody else.
Isn't that kind of cliche, though? The sort of creator that's haunted by the past, and so he creates a cure to sort of amend for this trauma that he's carrying around because of his dead, sick child.
Oh, it's totally cliche. Shit. It's totally cliche, but at least it's something. It's something
true.
To grab onto where you can feel something. I don't feel anything the rest of the time I'm watching anybody else in the series.
Okay, so you didn't empathize with Dolores' journey at all, because that's, I think, what we're really... That's supposed to be the one that gives us the feels, right? Is her trying to come to life. That didn't do it for you?
At the end, that's why I said the last episode I thought was a little bit better, because I actually liked the scene where she's achieving consciousness. Like you mentioned, it was kind of Cartesian. I thought it was actually, we can use this as a segue, very Jaynesian, the way it was described. It's like...
well, it was.
Yeah, it's the idea of narrative consciousness. Being able to take your memories and create a through line in your life from your memories to your present state to tell a story about yourself. And she goes from those auditory hallucinations of Arnold commanding her to do things to then realizing Arnold is her. So she has this new internal monologue now, as opposed to the external commands. And that transition from external auditory hallucination to internal monologue is consciousness, according to Jaynes, right? And so I actually thought that was pretty interesting. And I liked that fact. I feel like probably nobody, unless they've read this stuff, would see that.
Right.
But I thought that was pretty interesting. And maybe from here we will be able to empathize with Dolores and want to see her win. I don't know.
Okay, so I'll say I liked the idea that consciousness became constructed through the sort of linguistic social experience of the unfolding of memories and things like that was learned. I liked that. But the thing that was Cartesian about it was that it was this idea that that's what real consciousness is, this idea of coming to recognize yourself thinking about yourself, right? And then she's alive. Now you're alive. So it to me, it had that very sort of Cartesian moment of the cogito was acknowledged, and that is what somehow made her alive, and that I didn't love. So it definitely has the Jaynesian thing. But even Jaynes himself, I think for him, consciousness is still that sort of like self-referential awareness of oneself, right? So,
but specifically narratologically or
yes, narratologically, yeah, which is cool. And that's the part that I like about Jaynes, right? So, but let's talk a little bit about bicamerality, because I didn't even remember this, but you told me that you were going to be writing. A while ago, you wanted to write something about Jaynes and prayer and bicamerality or something like that. What? Tell us. Let's get into some good shit, good conceptual shit.
Well, I don't want to put my ideas out there on the internet or anything, but no, I think the interesting part of this in terms of the study of religion is, just to give a little backdrop, Jaynes was a psychologist in the 70s. He wrote a book called The Origin of Consciousness and the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind, which this series name drops several times, and clearly Jonathan Nolan or Lisa Joy or whatever the head writers have read this, or at least are familiar with it, since Robert Ford's character, or Anthony Hopkins' character, name drops it several times.
And the title of the last episode is Bicameral Mind. Or yeah.
So the idea basically for Jaynes is that something like 3,500 years ago, fairly recent in human history, human beings were not conscious or self-aware, as we would think so today. Whereas the vast majority of like anthropologists, I guess, would say that this is consciousness has been around for a long, long time, a lot longer than that. And so Jaynes goes back to like the Iliad and the Homeric Odysseys and stuff like that, and says you see a lot of individuals being commanded by gods. And so his theory basically is that once human beings develop language, which they develop first, language as a tool for individual and social cohesion and development. Once they have language, but they don't have consciousness yet. They don't have self-awareness. And so with that language, as it becomes more and more complex, as their brains get bigger and as they evolve and all this, eventually the language gets so complex they can use the language to receive commands, basically. So that's a chief in a tribe, or a king, or a prince, or whatever, a rainmaker would command, regular people, peasants, whatever, to do stuff. Well, what happens when that king or that priest or whatever dies? Well, then, you see they turn into gods or spirits of some sort, and they're still giving commands to the people, right? So individuals who have language but not consciousness are able to receive these auditory hallucinations, Jaynes theorized, that can command them what to do. This is a very effective form of social organization, because you could have no actual leader, at least not a leader actually there presently, and you could have people obeying certain social norms and rules that would, not create chaos or anything. However, eventually, that linguistic capability becomes so complex that the voice of an external command of an authority, like a god or a priest or whatever, or spirit, becomes your own internal monologue. And so our sub-vocalizations, where we're thinking to ourselves in our, autobiographical narrative tone, oh, I did this in the past, I'm going to do this, my intention is for this, my desires are these, I love this, hate this, whatever, all that autobiographical stuff we have in our mind is a more recent development from that. And so that whole theory is used in the show. Ford says at one point he doesn't think this is actually how consciousness in human beings develops, because most people don't think that, psychologists don't really think that this is how these things developed. Right. But he says that doesn't mean you can't use it to create new consciousness. Which I thought was a pretty interesting way to think about it. I never thought about it that way. What if you use this to create AI? And so Arnold becomes the god, and he has the robots experience these auditory hallucinations, basically commands given to them to do things via his voice, and they experience it as if they're hearing it from the external figure, even though there's nobody actually there, right? It's programmed into them. That plus all their memories, and there's this idea in the show, the cornerstone memory. Every robot character has a cornerstone memory that gives them meaning and significance in their life. Like Cyclops, James Marsden has the Escalante thing where he kills a bunch of people, right? Dolores has, what was her cornerstone memory?
Is it the one with her dad in the photo and shit like that?
Is that it? Maybe. I actually don't remember what hers is. Or Maeve is the one where Ed Harris comes and fucks your
kills
shit up.
the daughter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
then Bernard's is obviously the death of his son.
Yeah, exactly. And so they all have these cornerstone memories, and so they can relate all their current experiences back to that memory. And that creates a narrative of, this is who I am. I'm the person who went through this, and I'm using that memory to situate where I am now. And that level of complexity in language eventually can form this narrative idea or experience in a person. And so as language becomes more complex, consciousness eventually emerges as a socially and linguistically constructed phenomenon. That was Jaynes' theory. Consciousness is not biological. It doesn't emerge out of the brain or like, sort of physical processes in the brain, but is instead having that brain, but in a social and linguistic context. And so, Jaynes went further to say this is why most of the time we're not actually conscious, especially of all the things around us. We're only conscious of a very limited amount of time. He used an analogy or an illustration of the flashlight. When you shine a flashlight, everywhere you look, the flashlight's shining, so you think everything is lit because that's just what you're using to look, not realizing 99.9% of everything else around you is dark if you're using a flashlight, right? So consciousness we think is so important, but most of what we do is not actually conscious. He talks about like playing baseball. It's actually, or playing music or some really intense skill, you get worse at it the more conscious you are when you're doing it. So consciousness is this very small tip of the iceberg kind of thing. And we can actually do without it in a lot of cases. Hypnotism is another example of receiving these auditory hallucinations for commands. It's way more efficient.
Now, when it was first released, obviously, I think it was a popular seller. It sold a shitload of copies and it's been translated in a bunch of languages, but partly because it's so controversial, right? So I think there was a large time period when the consensus was that Jaynes was just flat out wrong. But it seems, from what I understand, in more recent years, that a lot of people, even people like Dennett, who is, obviously much more of a deflationary thinker, have come to see a lot of use in Jaynes' theory, even if they kind of would say, well, we obviously don't agree with it across the board, but it's very interesting. And so now there's like a Julian Jaynes Society. I actually used to get their newsletter. And there's actually a large push towards popularizing a lot of these ideas, or that his ideas have a lot of import and crossover to a lot of more accepted ideas. And he isn't kind of the peripheral fringe figure that he once was, right?
Yeah, I think even Dawkins has said some nice things about his work.
And he hates everybody.
Yeah, exactly. But he's also, part of Jaynes' theory is that religion rises through this bicameral mind experience. So the axial age religions are all a result of these auditory hallucinations of gods. Kind of like Nietzsche's idea that in Genealogy of Morals that ancestor worship was the origin of sort of the monotheisms. They just got bigger and bigger until they were just one god instead of a bunch of different ancestors. A similar idea in Jaynes talking about, Achilles hearing the voices of gods, to the prophets. You could talk about in the Old Testament, constantly hearing voices of God, Yahweh, being commanded to give other commands to the Israelites, right? It's very similar. And I think this is part of what got us so interested in the beginning was we had read so much of the Old Testament that this stuff became super illuminating of that experience. The prophets in the Old Testament could be seen as in this way, like Jaynes is arguing, receiving these auditory commands from God, and they're saying that I speak from the name, from the word of the Lord of the people. That was very interesting.
Yeah, and not only that, but I also was around a lot of people in the charismatic and Pentecostal traditions that would claim to hear the voice of God. And then Jaynes himself does a lot of work, or a lot of theorizing, I should say, about schizophrenia. And I have a history of schizophrenia in my family. So my grandmother was paranoid schizophrenic. And so I spent a lot of time around her and, experiencing that non-neurotypical state. And so when he starts talking about the experience or the phenomenon of schizophrenia, it was something that I think I automatically was kind of gravitated towards. And it was very interesting because for him, obviously we don't really know today fully what schizophrenia is. And some people would argue in the Jaynesian tradition that it's a sort of holdover of these auditory hallucinations that are still present somewhere in the hereditary lineage of consciousness that's been passed down.
And we also see, as much as schizophrenia can be, genetically passed down and hereditary, you see a lot of it being kind of a social phenomenon. People who are homeless have just absolutely disproportionate rates of schizophrenia, and it doesn't seem to be causal in the sense of being schizophrenic makes you homeless. People become schizophrenic after living on the street for a long time. When you were ostracized or removed from that social fabric, then a lot of times you make up for it by reverting back to this state, Jaynes would say, reverting back to this state where you receive the commands auditorily through hallucinations because there's no social group to join.
Yeah, solitary confinement in prison does the exact same thing. It's been actually demonstrated that even just a couple of weeks or a week in solitary confinement can have permanent, irreversible effects on the neuronal processes of your brain. And one of the outcomes can actually be hallucinations. One of the results or one of the symptoms of these transformations of the neurological structure or paradigm is that it can produce hallucinations. So it is really interesting how there is an element of social construction in the emergence of these, I guess what would you call them, altered states or different experiences, these different conscious experiences.
And I guess, we, especially as kids, experience hallucinations a lot more than we think. Was it something like 25% of all kids 5 and under have imaginary friends that they hear the voices of? But then those things become, abnormalized when you get older, so you try to stomp them out.
Did you have imaginary friends?
I don't think so. I mean, I might have.
I did, for sure.
The whole idea would be a kid doesn't become conscious, self-aware in a narratival sense until they're 4 or 5 or something. Maybe a little earlier. I'm not really sure about child development. But that's part of the argument too, right? If consciousness is biological, why does it take so long for it to appear? Well, the child has to become socialized before that socially constructed thing can then emerge.
Do you think that there's a crossover with this in Lacan's mirror stage? The idea that it isn't until you sort of recognize yourself as an entity through this process of, seeing yourself in the mirror. Obviously, that's the metaphor. But do you think that that could also relate to the emergence of consciousness?
Oh, yeah, the idea of castration.
Yeah.
From Lacan, right? Sort of entering into the symbolic.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's total confluence between those things. Yeah, for sure.
See, it just seems so. The thing that's so interesting to me is there seems to be so much potential for future research and thought in all of these various figures, because Lacan is obviously really in fashion, especially I think as Zizek made him more popular, maybe 10 years ago. So I feel like everyone talks about Lacan now. Obviously Dan Dennett and Dawkins, they're kind of popular scientist thinkers. Dennett is a philosopher of science and talks a lot about consciousness. And then you have Jaynes, and then you have individuals like myself who, I'm very interested in social construction and language as being the sort of, I guess, one of, if not the primary necessary conditions for the emergence of consciousness. Like, I tend to think of reflective consciousness as being linguistic consciousness because of maybe the influence of Jaynes on me. But I am really interested in, if we want to talk about meta-consciousness or reflective consciousness, as it being linguistic consciousness or socio-linguistic. And so it seems that there's a lot of ways to explore that within a paradigm of, I don't know, historical materialism or kind of post-structuralist thought. I feel like you could even bring in some like Deleuze or Foucault in here, and that there might be some interesting ways that you could make partnerships and connections. And I don't know, man. I just I don't see a lot of people talking about Jaynes. I know I mentioned him. I don't know if I mentioned on the podcast or not, but there was this philosopher named Gary Williams who used to do some work. He had a blog that was pretty active back in the day in like 2010, 2011, something like that. And he was doing a lot of work on Julian Jaynes and consciousness. And he was like the only guy that I knew that was out there that was doing work on Jaynes, and like nobody else gave a fuck about him. And so it was actually like you and him, Gary Williams, were the guys that like introduced me to who this guy was, who Julian Jaynes was. And other than that, no one fucking talks about him. But I feel like there's a lot there. There's a lot of potency in it.
Yeah, it's a huge theory, right? It's trying to explain so much, which is part of the allure and part of the drawback is that it obviously can't explain that much.
Right.
But that's what makes it fun for people who aren't in the business of talking about psychological development and trying to make it into a science. There's lots of things you can work with there, right? Great ideas that can be, played around with. That's what we do. We play with ideas.
That's fucking right, man.
I got a question for you, Austin.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, go ahead.
Do you think that the robots in Westworld experience qualia?
Well, see, that's the question, right? Sure. In a very simple sense, in the sense that a bat experiences qualia, or in the sense that an ant experiences qualia. I would argue, if we want to go down a deflationary route, I would argue that you and I experience qualia in a particular way, in different ways too. Obviously, you will experience it obviously in your own unique way, mine in my unique way. A bat would experience it obviously in the famous Nagel essay, what is it like to be a bat, where he talks about this. I do think that there is a subjective experience or an experience of subjective qualia in any creature that would have the ability. God, I'm trying to think. At what level? At what level does it cut out, right? Because is there a what it is likeness of a leaf? Does a leaf experience qualia? Well, I think most philosophers of mind would say no, clearly not. But what about an earthworm? Is there a what it is likeness of an earthworm? I think many philosophers of mind would say yeah. I think maybe even would Nagel say yeah?
I don't know where it stops. I don't know where the line is.
Yeah, I don't know where it stops. But I'm almost inclined, because I'm actually really influenced and really interested in the idea of panpsychist theories of ontology or metaphysics. And so I kind of want to say that there's a what it is likeness for anything, I
That's
think
your vitalism coming through.
It is my vitalism coming through. And Antonio Damasio, and I can't remember the guy's name. What is his name? He was a Nobel-winning chemist. Ilya Prigogine. They talk about proto-agency in, single-celled, simple organisms, and how you can see agency in its germinal phase. And so in a fucking single-cell organism, an amoeba, is there a what it is likeness to be an amoeba? Maybe, it's just that we like to define things based on our experience of what it is like to be human, and that's what consciousness is. And then we sort of take a monopolistic ownership over what it means to be conscious, or what it means to be aware, or what it means to think. And I think all of those things are different. Awareness, consciousness, and thought are all different. And that's one of the things that's interesting about Jaynes, is Jaynes talks about consciousness as being a sort of unique linguistic historical phenomenon that emerged in humans 3,000 years ago. So an earthworm isn't conscious, just like a fetus isn't conscious, just like a lion isn't conscious, but nevertheless there still can be awareness or a what it is likeness within those things. So there are gradations of complexity that we need to consider when it comes to mentality, right? Before we talk about consciousness, because consciousness for him is reflective consciousness. So I'm kind of the mind that, yeah, there is some level of awareness in earthworms, and maybe even in plants, as plants reach for the sunlight and their roots reach to reach nutrients in the soil, and some of them link up together to create these superorganisms, and they do so with a sense of obviously awareness of what they need versus what's provided by the environment, and also an awareness that making these connections will strengthen. And so the question is, well, do they just do so randomly? Well, not necessarily, because you can put two new plants and they will find each other, but they're not going to necessarily go off into other places. So somehow they're communicating with one another. And so I think in order for there to be communication, even if it's a non-standard form of communication, a non-reflective form of communication, or a non-linguistic form of communication, there's still a sense of qualia, maybe? I don't know, man. What do you think?
Wait, just to finish your thought there, circle back around. So non-biological robots might also have that same experience of what is it like?
Yeah. I think so.
Okay. Are you familiar with the philosophical zombies thought experiment?
Yeah, David Chalmers, right?
Yeah, was he the first one who came up with it? I know he discusses it, but I don't know if he came up with it.
I don't know if he came up with it, but I know that he's all obsessed with zombies and shit.
Yeah, so the idea of philosophical zombies, or sometimes they're called P-zombies, I think, right? Is can you think of a zombie as a human being just subtracted consciousness? So it's just a human being who acts only on instinct or whatever and doesn't experience any qualia or anything. It's just completely non-conscious. If that's the case, then that seems to be a major difference between us and them. They don't exist, but just hypothetically, if you can think about that difference, there must be a difference. So then consciousness would be a thing of some sort. I think is the basic idea behind that, right?
Yeah, which is why he would say that there is not going to ever be a time where consciousness can be transferred to silicon-based life forms, because he thinks it's something that's particular and unique to human beings.
Yeah, which then if you bring in Jaynes, it changes, right? Because it doesn't have to be biological necessarily. Since it's a social and linguistic thing, there's no reason to think that computers or robots couldn't eventually have those same capabilities. But anyway, I was thinking about, do these robots in Westworld have subjective experience in the sense that we think about it, of qualia? Or are they more like zombies? Could a zombie eventually achieve consciousness if you could teach it language? That should be The Walking Dead season 15.
I was going to say, have you ever seen the movie Warm Bodies? Come on, dude. That's what happens with Warm Bodies.
Oh, that movie was fucking terrible.
No way, dude. It talks about this very same thing.
Oh, I hated that movie so much.
They come back to life, dude. I think I recommended that one to you, too, and you gave me shit for it.
Teen romance movie. What the fuck?
No, dude. It's cool, dude. And Teresa Palmer's in it. Come on.
It was Twilight with zombies.
No. Come on. It was interesting, but that was the idea, right? The zombies come back to life through that sort of empathic spark. I'm actually really interested in the idea of sparking back to life from zombies, because that's something, Marx talks about zombies and vampires, and people talk about, like, Sartre talks about people under serial conditions are inhuman, and so I'm really interested in, I kind of think of them as like zombies. We're zombies under serial conditions, but we can be sparked to life. Yeah, we're the undead. Exactly, but we can be sparked back to life through empathy and the connections that emerge through the conditions of the apocalypse in the group and shit like that. So
Walking Dead season 30 should be just like, you know what, fuck this. We're not going to fight against zombies anymore. We're going to teach them language, and eventually they're going to come back to being conscious again.
Okay, so here's the only thing I would say to push back on something you said a minute ago. I think that when we try to equate qualia with consciousness, we're making a conflation, because I think there's a difference, right? So for Nagel, a bat has a what it is likeness. So there is a qualia. There's a subjective experience of qualia for a bat, but a bat's not conscious, right? So
not
I'm
everyone
not
would
sure.
agree with that, clearly. Yeah.
Not everyone. Wait, what did you say? Not everyone would agree with him?
Yeah.
Exactly. I do 100%. So for me, I'm not sure that I like the sort of the Chalmers position of zombies not having qualia simply because they don't experience consciousness. I'm not sure that we require reflective metaconsciousness in order to be able to speak entirely about subjectivity. I just think it's a different level of complexity.
That's what's very interesting about Jaynes, right? He kind of develops a method for thinking about this where language can come first, qualia can come first, and still not have consciousness.
Right.
Which seems like I would think a much better way, much more intuitive way, I should say, of thinking about what zombies would be like. Right? They would not have language probably, but they would have qualia. They'd have what is a likeness, like an animal would. But they would not have consciousness. And if we can think about human beings as fairly recently in human history being in a similar state, I mean, are zombies having auditory hallucinations of brains?
Well, in the movie Warm Bodies, Nicholas Holt's character does have an inner monologue that's going on the whole time. So,
I don't think they thought very deep about that, yo.
Maybe I was projecting all of my own shit onto that. Okay, so wrapping things up, I've only got one thing that I want to say. You know how I was talking about how Julian Jaynes could be supplemented with all these other interesting ideas? There's one more interesting idea that people laugh at. But you know what? I think it's fucking interesting, even though it probably doesn't have much scientific or philosophical validity to it. But it's Terence McKenna's stoned ape theory. You know about that shit?
I have no idea what that is.
So Terence McKenna basically argues that consciousness emerged through the development of language because early hominids found magic mushrooms. And when they ate the magic mushrooms, it unlocked the depths of reflective consciousness. And that is how consciousness emerged. The stoned ape theory. Now, I think that could kind of have some crossover to what we got with Jaynes here, where Jaynes wants to talk about the emergence of language. Well, maybe it has to do with eating magic mushrooms and going on a psychedelic hallucinogenic trip that unlocks certain areas in the brain and creates different neuronal patterns and connections that also contributes. So we're talking about a bunch of different necessary conditions here that all came together to create this weird fucking bastardized expression of life that we have that we call human consciousness, or as Rust Cole called it, the tragic misstep in human evolution. But yeah, stoned ape theory.
If an ape just got high, how did consciousness transmit from the generation to generation then?
Well, Lamarckism, I guess.
I guess that seems like a one-off thing. Like one ape was like, "Oh my god, I think therefore I am," and then no one else understood him.
Can you imagine? You're the one ape, you're running around, you're like, guys, you don't understand. I can talk, and everyone's looking at you. They'd probably just kill you because you'd be the fucking weird guy.
Yeah, you'd be Socrates, man. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I don't know. I don't know if it was like a collective thing. I don't really know much about it, to be completely honest. I've only ever heard people talk about it. I've never read his work myself. I've just heard a lot of different people talk about it, and I'm fascinated because it sounds interesting to me. And I do think that psychoactive states and hallucinogenic experiences do have the capacity to do crazy things like that. So unlock certain doors and whatnot. I don't know about if it takes human beings to the next level of evolution, but it's interesting at least.
It just makes listening to MGMT enjoyable, which otherwise would not be the case.
No, I was going to say, it's funny. I saw the new Spider-Man movie or something like that, and MGMT was in the trailer, and I was like, "Isn't this 7 years old? This song, 8 years old?" It was that. You know that one? That's all weird. It's talking about dating models and shit like that.
Fuck that shit.
Fuck that shit.
Alright, so for our next segment, we're doing the Sticky Leaves. This is where one of us explains what it is that's giving us meaning and significance in a world devoid of both. Austin, what do you got this week?
So, I found a scholar somehow, I don't even remember, through the interwebs about 6 or 7 years ago by the name of Roberto Unger. Are you familiar with Roberto Unger, Troy?
I am, yes.
And his ideas were very interesting to me. Roberto Unger in the 70s was a leading figurehead of this movement called critical legal studies, and since then he has written about just a panoply of issues, from economics to political theory to philosophy to law, and he actually was a law professor, or still is, I guess, at Harvard University for a very long time. As a matter of fact, he was one of Obama's professors. And interestingly enough, he's actually been very critical of Obama over the last few years. But he was one of Obama's professors. He also is a politician in Brazil, or has been a politician in Brazil. I don't know if he is at the moment, considering they've had some shakeups going on down there. But I know he was up until recently, I think from the beginning, or as recent as the beginning of this year. But anyway, one of the things that Troy talked about a few times, but a couple of weeks ago on a podcast, was the idea that human beings... that we don't really have, and you talked about it even in the Shitty Minute this week, we don't really have a sort of program for talking about positive freedoms, or these clear ideas of what we can make the world into, or how we can be better. And this is one of the things that I actually really like about Roberto Unger. He talks about life as being the prime thing that we need to aim towards and stimulate. And he talks about deep freedom, and he talks about high energy democracies. And these are all terms that he uses to contrast with this sort of weak liberal expressions of those terms that we have in the present social landscape. So he's a figure that I thought was very interesting. Critical legal studies, and then his view of sort of democratic. It's not an incrementalism. I know a lot of people like to shit on the idea of incrementalism. The revolutionaries want to overturn the government from one wholesale thing to another, and then there are reformists. Well, Roberto Unger calls himself an experimentalist, and his idea is that you want to kind of like perpetually experiment with differing ideas to truly stimulate deep freedom and life and maximize life. Well, anyway, all that is kind of abstract and non-specific, but there is a letter that he wrote to his nephew in 2002 when his nephew was about to graduate from 6th grade. And it is one of my favorite things that has ever been written, and I come back to it quite often. And this week, for some reason, I came across a lecture by Unger, and then it just made me think about this letter, and I wanted to share this letter because I think it's so beautiful. So here is this letter that he wrote to his nephew, and it's, just a couple paragraphs. So bear with me. Here I go. When you asked to write a few words of reflection on your passage from 6th to 7th grade, not for you alone, but for all your class, I felt disoriented. We should, whenever possible, speak to what matters and speak from the heart. But how to do so, and on an occasion that is neither private nor public, and that invites the discussion of personal truth while repelling the revelation of personal experience. In the end, it seemed best to treat you as the strong and independent spirit you are. As we pass through childhood, each of us, a storehouse of alternative ways of becoming a person, imagines many different courses of action and of life he may later take. However, we cannot be everything in the world. We must choose a path and reject other paths. This rejection, indispensable to our self-development, is also a mutilation. In choosing as we must, we cast aside many aspects of our humanity. If, however, we cast them aside completely, we become less than fully human. We must continue somehow to feel the movements of the limbs we cut off. To learn how to feel them is the first major work of the imagination. Later on, as adults, we struggle in the world and against it. We settle into a way of living and doing. A mummy begins to form around each of us, diminishing our reach and our vision by accommodating them to our circumstance. We begin to die many small deaths. Our aim should be to die but once. We can continue to live only by breaking out of the mummy. We can break out of it only by denying ourselves some of the safeguards with which we protect ourselves against the frustration of our longings and the defeat of our ambitions. Life comes before goodness, because vitality is the condition of sustained and magnanimous compassion. We are plunged into a great and mysterious darkness, which our minds are able to penetrate only at the edges. Luck and misfortune, beginning with the accident of our birth in a particular class, nation, and community, shape much of what happens to us. We would be almost nothing if we did not fight against the consequences of this fate and recognize in ourselves the unresigned and uncontainable spirits we really are. By rebelling against our belittlement, by the alliance between chance and society, we cease to be little. We become great, unshaken, unsubdued, unterrified. Our struggle, which is the condition of greatness, would also be the cause of our perversion were it not transformed by love. To love another person and to be driven by a vision defining a task are two decisive events a person can experience. They make us godlike, but not just like the God who creates, also like the God who suffers and dies, because through them we also become hostages to other people who may rebuff our love or destroy our work. This dependence on the others is not our doom, it is our salvation. All of this is, and this is the last sentence right here that I love, all of this is cause for joy. Right now, we are both alive. Better you and I not think too much about this fact, or we might be overwhelmed and paralyzed by joy.
He wrote that to a 12-year-old?
Yep.
What the hell was his nephew you said he wrote it to?
His nephew, yeah.
Yeah, what the hell are you thinking when you read that?
Uncle Roberto, fucking weird again.
Yeah, what the hell, man? Just give me $10 so I can go down to get some burgers. No, that was pretty great.
Yeah, I love it, man. It's been one of those things that I periodically have come back to and read. I think one of the favorite things that I love about it, obviously I love that final bit about being overwhelmed by the joy of being alive, but one of my favorite things about it actually that he talks about that I've tried to do myself in moments of meditation is the idea of feeling the limbs of the choices that I've not made as being actual choices that I have made and actually feeling them and recognizing them. I think that's one of the things that is, I don't know, it's something that I wouldn't have paid much attention to. I wouldn't have given much consideration to had I not read this. And there's something kind of profound, I think, about that, of giving a sort of more fleshed out, immersive experience of myself in my own sort of existential drama.
That's some like Rick and Morty multiverse shit right there.
Yeah, exactly, right?
That was good. I think I saw the other day. Roberto Unger has a website that has a whole bunch of different Harvard courses in philosophy, politics, economics, all sorts of stuff. I'm on his website. I think it's robertounger.com.
Oh.
So yeah, go out there and check that out, everybody, if you want to listen to some courses.
Yeah, Harvard-level courses for free? Fuck yeah. Can I put that on my CV and get the same social clout that I would get if I had gone there for undergrad? Does that count?
Fuck Harvard, by the way.
Yeah, but I mean, just so you can have social capital. Sweet. So this week, been bullshitting. We're going to talk about the meme that's been going around about, what is it, Troy? The before 2016, I looked like this, and at the end of 2016, I looked like that.
I thought it was me at the beginning of 2016 and me at the end of 2016.
Yeah, that's it. Me at the beginning of 2016 versus me at the end of 2016. Did you do one of these memes, Troy?
I muted it on Twitter, so I never have to see it again.
Can you mute hashtags?
Oh, yeah. Hell yeah.
Oh, fuck. I wish I would have known that. I've never known. Well, I mean, not like I really need to mute too much stuff, but it's good to know.
Well, the program I use, you can at least. I don't know if the Twitter main domain can do that, but...
Oh.
But
So?
yeah, dude, I mean, I don't even know that football is happening right now. It's amazing.
You muted football?
I've muted every team, every great player. Like, I get so much joy whenever I mute some new football thing that's happening, and then I realize I'm never going to hear this name again. Because nobody I know will say it, and I won't see it on Twitter, so I'm never going to hear this again. I'm so overjoyed.
I feel like you're limiting your scope to the world. This is like this sort of funneling of information that's being criticized on Facebook and shit like that, except you're doing it yourself.
Can we give a in defense of echo chambers episode?
In defense of Echo, yeah, that's exactly right.
I kind of love the fact that I don't have stupid shit that I don't care about curated onto my social media platforms. That's kind of actually great.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there are some bad effects when it comes to making predictions about things. But then just don't be stupidly unscientific when you're making predictions about things. But still,
Problem
like,
solved.
Refuse to have to deal with shit you don't like. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. Okay. So you didn't like this meme then, huh?
I mean, I don't really give a shit. Still, you mentioned it, so I decided I was gonna devote 5 minutes to it. So
okay.
I came up with a couple of things related to our podcast, specifically the categories of music, movies, and philosophy, and what it was like at the beginning of 2016 to what it's like at the end.
Okay.
And I've also been sick like 3 times in the past month, and just finished finals, so I've felt especially downtrodden. Although I'm very existentially okay, so nobody worry. Okay, first, music. Me at the beginning of 2016, Chance the Rapper's coloring book.
Okay.
You know, happy, joyous, things are going to be great. Chance the Rapper's just like, I mean,
yeah,
who wouldn't want to like be best friends with Chance the Rapper, right?
That's right.
Me at the end of 2016, Danny Brown's Atrocity Exhibition. Just completely off your head on coke, wandering the streets, half naked, it's freezing, and Danny Brown's voice is like screaming into your ear.
I like that
That's
one.
me. That's me at the end of 2016.
Okay.
That's a sad story, right?
Yeah. What else you got?
Okay, movies. Me at the beginning of 2016, Sing Street.
Okay, I'm with you on that 100%.
Creation, developments, making stuff, triumphing over everything in the world, including bullies. Me at the end of 2016, 10 Cloverfield Lane. Did you see that?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, just quick spoilers, so skip like 20 seconds if you don't want to hear the end of this movie. But the end of the movie is basically like, oh, you think shit was bad? Oh, it's so much worse than that. Aliens have come and they're destroying the world.
Yeah. Can I do one real quick off the fly? So me at the beginning of 2016, Sing Street. Me at the end, Room. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding, but that just popped into my head. Okay,
I got a philosophy one for you.
Okay,
so.
let's go.
Me at the beginning of 2016, Leibniz's monadology.
Okay.
Like, we got this figured out. It's all just monads. I figured out the world in like 3 pages. Like 100 propositions or whatever the fuck monadology has. Best of all possible worlds. everything's understandable, everything's comprehensible, brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
Me, at the end, 2016. Albert Camus' Myth of Sisyphus. Just moving that boulder up, but you know what? You gotta imagine Sisyphus happy.
That's right.
Suicide ain't gonna do it for you. Religion ain't gonna do it for you. Just move the boulder, but do it at a protest or some shit like that.
Mm-hmm. I like it. You got another, or is that it?
That's it. That's all I've got.
Okay. See, I didn't even partake. And the reason I didn't partake is because I have been so annoyed by the sort of meme that 2016 is the worst year ever. It drives me crazy. Every time a celebrity dies, like when Leonard Cohen dies or John Glenn dies. John Glenn was 90 motherfucking 5. I get it. He's an astronaut. Important in American history and in world history. He's fucking 95. He's supposed to die. That's what happens. Leonard Cohen was like 83. He's supposed to die. His music still lives on with us. That's beautiful. That's amazing. He has legacy. He has an ability to affect us forever. The world isn't worse because some fucking celebrities die. Like, I don't know. So, you get all these people that are like, I looked all youthful and vibrant and beautiful, and then I looked like the fucking mummy from Tales from the Crypts or whatever it was at the end of 2016. And I'm just like, I don't know, man. For some reason, it's really annoyed me.
There's got to be like some demonstrable version of like calendar bias where we end up always thinking about the beginning of the year as being glorious and the end of the year as being terrible for some weird reason. And it's not true at all. I mean, we're probably just as miserable in January as we are in like November and stuff. But
is this a thing that happens every year? Do people say, oh, 2015, such a terrible year?
Every year.
Does it really?
Every year people say that. I remember every single year people saying this.
See, all that does is just delegitimize this shit. And I just want to, you know what I am? I'm so tired of meme culture where people just say the same thing over again. Because I don't necessarily believe that we have original thoughts in an entire sense. I think we all are obviously conditioned by similar circumstances and similar external linguistic structures and social structures and religious codes and political codes and all this other stuff. So I do think that there's a sense in which we kind of are spiraling, maybe not circling, but we're spiraling in our communication. But I feel like this meme shit is just this weird like circularity that I get it. I mean, maybe people are trying to communicate and there's a sense in which they're connecting to humans, but it doesn't seem like it. It just seems that people are trying to be dramatic because other people are dramatic. You know, like, oh my God, this is the worst year ever, or this is the best thing ever, or this is the worst. I can't believe it. Did you hear what Kanye said about Taylor Swift? It's like, motherfuckers, we are so goddamn dramatic. And all this meme shit does to me is like bring out this drama in it. I'm at a breaking point, Troy. I'm at a breaking point. This is the worst year ever. This is the worst year ever.
There's a subtle hint of irony, Austin, in you complaining about other people being way too excited about something.
Yeah, maybe.
Here's the thing, though. Here's where I think it's different.
Okay.
2016 being horrible. Usually when we say this, we say this year's been horrible, whatever, because people died or bad things happened in the world. But then, you know what? I can't wait for next year. Nobody is saying that about 2017. Everybody knows 2017 is going to suck ass.
Really?
And just is like, didn't you see that meme of I thought it was pretty funny where it's like 2016. It's like a dark cloud looming over somebody, and so then the person's like, "Oh man, I can't wait until this year is over." And then it pans over to 2017. And it's like a giant hulking monster waiting to consume you. Like everybody knows this is not going to get better. So I guess we kind of have to be resigned to the fact that this is probably as good as it's going to be for a while.
Well, fine then. I guess me at the beginning of 2016, Sing Street. Me at the end of 2016, Captain Fantastic. It's not really that bad, but
yeah, I see the through line there. Yeah.
All right. Well, fuck it. Moving on.
All right, so we're throwing off the mic. See what we got in This Week in Hip Hop, yeah?
Yes.
With first-class legroom, big cocktails for everyone, and a schedule you can depend on.
Hey, what's up, worldwide internets? This is Michael Burns with This Week in Hip Hop on Owls of Dawn, broadcasting live from a bed. Don't feel good today, but I'm still here. Obviously not a ton of new stuff happening in music because it's the end of the year. A lot of people are taking it easy, getting their year-end list together. Mine is still coming for you. Get ready. But two records came out this week that people are talking about. I listened to both of them because I care about you. The first of these got a lot of hype. J. Cole, For Your Eyes Only. That's 4, just like the number. And Eyes with a Z. Now, some of you may or may not know this. I am not the biggest fan of Jermaine Cole. He seems like a really good dude, and he stands for a lot of positive things. I really liked the 2 preview tracks that came out last week where he dissed Kanye a little bit. That was cool. But I've never been a fan of his records. And I'm not really a fan of this one. I listened to it because I want to give it a chance because people get excited about him. He's a talented guy. The 2 songs that I would listen to again were Immortal and Ville Mentality. But it's a lot of the same J. Cole stuff. It seems really self-aware and over-earnest. He still has some really corny lines where he compares getting good head to taking Excedrin. And he sings a lot on this one too. And I don't really need to hear that. One thing I can say about it is that the production's pretty good, and it's pretty short, so you can give it a listen without too much effort. But hey, it could be a lot worse than J. Cole. I still prefer him to a lot of other things out. I'll just probably never listen to the record again, but shouts to the 15-year-olds that will. Other record that came out this week was Ab-Soul of TDE. Record Do What Thou Wilt. It's really good. I feel kind of bad for him because so many dope things have come out of TDE this year that it's really hard to overshadow that. I mean, especially it's hard to overshadow the Schoolboy Q record, but it's really solid. And it's an interesting listen to go from listening to J. Cole to listening to the Ab-Soul record, because it's the difference between someone who is super self-aware and earnest and sort of projecting an image to someone who really doesn't give a fuck and is trying to tell stories and speak his truth the way he sees fit. But the Ab-Soul record is really good. I definitely recommend listening to it. My favorite track on it was Beat the Case, and that one features Schoolboy Q. And I think it's interesting because the song, it sounds in a certain way like a sequel to Groovy Tony off the Schoolboy record. So listen to that. And then the opening track, something that's getting a lot of notice, is that Ab-Soul goes at Jay Electronica a bit for his disses of Kendrick. And it's good, and it's funny. And let's just say this going into 2017, like, fuck Jay Electronica. He put out 5 really good verses and then has done nothing. I'm sick of waiting around for it. So shouts to Ab-Soul for having the balls to give it to Electronica a little bit. Those are the 2 records that came out. J. Cole, probably don't listen to it. Ab-Soul, definitely listen to it. 2 tracks came out today. And for me, today is Thursday. Odyssey, probably my favorite rapper out of DC, put out a new track called Things. It's the first track off a forthcoming record. He also announced a tour, a worldwide tour today. I know I'm going to be seeing him in March in Bristol. You should see him wherever you're at because Odyssey is a really dope live performer. The track Things is really good, and it definitely has more of a DC sound. You can hear kind of a go-go and club influence on it, so it's cool to hear Odyssey rapping over that. But just because the track is a little more, I don't want to say commercial, but a little more club friendly, a little more upbeat, it doesn't mean that he's watering down the lyrical content. It's Odyssey as sharp as ever. Another thing that came out today, a new Madlib and Doom track, called Avalanche. And I'm not even going to really talk about it because it's everything that you would expect. It's a really good Madlib beat. It's Doom rapping in the way that only Doom does for about 2 minutes and 40 seconds. Just go listen to it. Hopefully this is the sign of more to come. So both those tracks, the Odyssey and the Madlib and Doom, really dope. Check those out. The only other hip-hop related thing that happened that I guess I should speak on, even though I don't want to or feel like I'll get in trouble, Yeezus met with Trump the other day. All we can really say about that is, like, Kanye is clearly going through some shit. I hope he is in a better place mentally soon. But in terms of that particular action, fuck him. Fuck whoever that's around him is enabling this. He looks like a bleach blonde idiot going and giving any sort of credibility to fucking Donald Trump. And it's disgusting in terms of all of the wonderful political work being done by so many members of the hip-hop community. And of course, considering the fact that hip-hop itself is an art form that emerged fighting the influences of people like Donald Trump and literally fighting the political influence of Trump and his family in New York City. Like, fuck that. I don't think any rap artist should ever give a sort of minute or a second of normalcy and credibility to Donald Trump. And I think Kanye West really needs to sit down and think about what the fuck he is doing with this right now. But I'm proud that there's so many wonderful hip-hop artists to listen to that wouldn't be caught dead in Trump fucking Tower. But anyone you hear trying to defend Kanye on this one is just completely full of shit. Do not let them do that. And just because the guy made some good music, when's the last time he made good music? 5 or 6 years ago. Doesn't mean we need to stand up for this shit. So fuck Kanye West. Fuck his blonde hair. Fuck Donald Trump. But happy holiday. Happy holidays. Christ is born. Ho, ho, ho. I'm out. Catch you later. Michael Burns, This Week in Hip Hop. At Mike Oberon on Twitter. I love you. Bye.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael, for that episode this week, or that segment this week. T-Roy, what are your thoughts on Yeezus and his blonde hair and his Trump-loving shenanigans?
Man, I'm just wondering why we're talking about Yeezy meeting with Trump when Madlib met with Doom.
Yeah, right. What's more important, right?
I mean, are you a fan of the Mad Villainy record from back in the day?
I know of it, and I know that I should be a fan of it, but you know, when I was listening to Pennywise, I didn't have time.
Bro, that record, you got to check that one out. I mean, I don't want to be like usurping Michael's place here, but I'm pretty sure he'd say the same thing to you right now.
He absolutely would.
So yeah, let's pretend that this whole thing didn't happen. I mean, let's pretend that that one of the most important people, whether fortunately or not, in the black community, was basically used as a ploy to cover over the news of the day. Let's just forget that ever happened.
And the news of the day had to do with Russian hackers or something?
Yeah, there was a bunch of stuff. There was like an expose written in like Newsweek or something. I don't remember, or maybe the New York Daily News. I forget which one. On on Trump and his businesses. And then there's stuff in Syria. There's stuff in the Russia stuff. I mean, it's just all this stuff. And then all we're talking about is this shit.
Rex Tillerson's ties to Putin, and apparently there is I guess you would call it like an oil reserve in the Arctic that Russia wants to get to, but there have been sanctions against them that they haven't been able to get to for the past few years. But Rex Tillerson has gone on record and for years has been very opposed to any sanctions. So, it just works out quite well that he is now going to be one of the lead influencers in figuring out international and foreign relations and the sanctions that relate therein. So that's kind of cool. Yeah,
and Exxon is the only company that has the technology to get that stuff out of the Arctic.
Yeah, that's coincidental, isn't it?
Yeah. So we'll be seeing the Kremlin and Exxon hooking up pretty soon.
This reminds me of what my homie Scott, who is a listener, so what up, Scott, what he always talks about. He likes to quote Noam Chomsky, where they're talking about, he's like, conspiracy theories aren't some like fanciful thing. It's not a conspiracy theory when two men in suits behind closed doors shake hands and make a deal. That's not a conspiracy theory.
Yeah, I mean, conspiracy theories aren't inherently like not that they don't happen. Like, tell Julius Caesar conspiracies don't happen, or JFK, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
I mean, conspiracies do happen. Conspiracy theories, as a sort of irrational impulse, has to do with why we believe things, not whether or not conspiracies do happen, because they do.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I'm not saying that chemtrails are a real thing, people. Don't start tweeting us. Or the Bigfoot's real. Although I do want Bigfoot and Loch Ness Monster to be real. Those are the ones that would really make my childhood dreams happy. So
fuck, man, Nessie's real. I lived in Scotland, yo. So did you.
Yeah, I didn't see her. I didn't see her though, man. I tried. I looked a couple times.
I'm not even going outside though. Chemtrails are real.
Chemtrails are real. All right, let's get the fuck out of here before we start going down this rabbit hole. Tower 11 or 7 or whatever the fuck it was. All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Owls at Dawn. We will be coming back for the next 2 weeks with a couple of unique episodes. One, we don't know what it's going to be called, but it's basically going to be a shitty hour. And then another one is going to be a sticky hour. So basically, it's going to be some sort of rant-oriented episode, and then one is like a recommendation-oriented. Is that, or a meaning-given episode? Is that it, Troy?
Yeah, man, I think we're going to throw a little wrench into the mix and make the format a little unique, so it's not just straight up shitty ranting for an hour or, splurging all over the speakers for an hour. But, it'll be something like that, but with a unique format.
I'm down. All right. Well, cool. In the meantime, you can check us out. Instagram, Twitter, at owls _at _dawn. Is that right? Did I get that right?
I don't know.
Yeah. And you can email us. What's the email address, Troy?
owlsatdawnpodcast@gmail.com.
And hopefully, if you are kind or if you just feel like padding our stats, maybe you could leave us a review and a 5-star rating on iTunes. Other than that, T-Roy?
The world is flat. Das Vidania, Amerikanski.